Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. I'm looking forward to this episode. This one is going to be on Sanction. So, why do a show on Sanction? Or, what is Sanction? I don't know if you want to start with a little bit of a definition or.
Well, I think the reason we're doing a show on sanction is because it is a major issue in the objectivist movement, and it's something that Ayn Rand brought up. She had a concept, the sanction of the victim. So we want to discuss that and try to explore this idea and how it relates to objectivists today, and how one might apply or not apply this idea to their daily lives. So I'll just begin with the definition of sanction. Sanction is an example of a contronym, which is a word that has two definitions that contradict each other. So we don't want to confuse the two definitions. So to clarify, we're talking about sanction um, as a means of giving approval or to encourage or tolerate something. It can also mean to penalize or punish, and we're not talking about that version of it.
Right.
So, in a sense, we're only discussing the idea of sanction as approving something, and or authorizing it, or tolerating it, or encouraging. And
Absolutely.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, so in objectivism, the concept, the sanction of the victim, this is where a victim sanctions or tolerates their own victimizer. So the classic example is a capitalist who might donate money to a university, which is known for teaching students to hate capitalism. So that would be some guy who depends on a society that values capitalism, giving money to his enemy,
Right.
people who
Supporting
are
your destroyers.
supporting your destroyers, exactly. So this concept has been applied to the question of objectivists associating with non-objectivists, such as libertarians and religious conservatives. So in this podcast, we're going to explore that concept of sanction and how it relates to our movement.
Exactly. I mean, for me, it sanction of the victim started off in Atlas Shrugged, meaning good people like Dagny or Hank, who were still sanctioning or assisting the existing corrupt regime by trying to help keep things going. But later, due to the toxic nature of their social group, the collective, it became the main excuse for kicking someone out of their club. And I think, especially since Rand's death, it's often applied arbitrarily. Um, Harry Binswanger talked about Ayn Rand not talking to him for 9 months over the issue of moral sanction in 1964.
I know cases of people who are intellectual leaders in objectivism who had to integrate and correct errors. I myself was in Ayn Rand's doghouse in 1964-65 on the very issue of moral sanction, which I didn't understand. But within a few months, 9 months, so I gotten out of it, and she shook hands with me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen a pattern that where the excommunicated that get reaccepted can often become the most pious executioners for a group.
Yeah, well, he learned, how to shun people and excommunicate them from her, apparently. So,
Exactly.
I mean, but she was famous for, doing that sort of thing. She was a very powerful figure and had powerful ideas. And so I can understand that if Harry wasn't understanding a concept, that she may have lost tolerance, or, she wasn't, happy with him, and because he wasn't learning at the rate she wanted him to learn.
Sure. And that's partially just to show, how long this has been an issue within the kind of inner circle within objectivism. Part of what inspired this show for me was the Ayn Rand Center UK doing a show called Why We Would Never Debate the Atlas Society, in response to Craig Biddle debating Stephen Hicks on open versus closed objectivism. And we've got some clips related to that later. But the message is that there are some people that are even outside the realm of debate, that to debate them would itself be a sanction. And in that spirit, this is a clip that you actually made. It's of Yaron talking about Richard Wolff in 2019, someone he later debated.
I mentioned this in previous videos where I've talked about Richard Wolff. He also talks with hatred in his voice. He is an ugly, ugly soul. He has an ugly, ugly mind. He has an ugly, ugly spirit. He is an evil man through and through. And you can see that justice pervades in this world. He's not a happy person. He suffers for his evasions.
Yeah, he calls Richard Wolff an evil man through and through.
Right. But Yaron did end up debating Richard Wolff in October 2021, but only to say right after that he wouldn't debate him again, given what he learned, with it being an implied sanction to do so.
Dave says, Wolff is a mediocre propagandist for a horrific cause. He sounds as angry and miserable as the dictators he looks up to. I agree. And as I said, I would never debate him again once he has completely revealed himself as an apologist for mass murder.
So first, Yaron was saying that Richard Wolff is evil through and through. So if he's willing to debate Richard Wolff, that must mean that he's sanctioning evil, because there's nothing else to sanction, or there's nothing else to approve of other than evil, if he's just completely evil. So it seems weird that Yaron has this standard of not sanctioning his victimizer, the evil, yet he's willing to have a debate or dialogue with Richard Wolff. And then afterwards he says, no, well, I won't debate him again because now he's revealed his true self.
Right. That was my point. It sure sounded like he already knew that about Wolff in 2019. But I think, his rationale would have been, oh, well, I didn't know as much. And until we actually had the debate, and I was trying to win over some young socialists to at least try Ayn Rand. But, the problem is that in February of 2023, he's apparently forgotten his previously stated principles and seems ready to debate Wolff again on a podcast.
Daniel says, we need a rematch with Richard Wolff versus Yaron. Somebody's working on that. Somebody's trying to get me to debate him on some podcast or something. So stay tuned. Who knows?
Who knows? Whatever.
I mean, is it a moral sanction if you forgot what you said about never debating him again?
Yeah, if it's a friend of yours and he wants you to debate this person, then you do. That's what you do. You do what your friend says.
I mean, is it at all fair to wonder if there's some ambiguity in how these sanction rules are applied by the orthodox muckety mucks?
Well, it's certainly arbitrary at this point with Yaron, because I think he doesn't really have an objective standard for who he'll debate. It's mostly if he thinks it'll get him an audience, or he'll get some clout off of it, or maybe money's involved, he'll do it. If it's the right price or it's the right amount of viewers. He doesn't, his standard isn't, is it, in the long run, is this good for me? It's like, am I going to get a lot of viewers? If a lot of viewers is good for him, That's like his standard.
But they would say, oh, it wouldn't matter the viewers for the Atlas Society or something like that. I just, speaking of the objective standard or objective standard, there's a couple of years ago, Yaron was asked if he'd seen the then just released Prager University video about Ayn Rand, that had already had 50,000 views. It now has, I think, like 7 million. And that, OSI paid for it. And they asked Yaron if he thinks it was a good use of funds.
I would veto the Institute doing the same thing. And if talked about not doing it, because I think Prager, what Prager stands for, because of Prager's dishonest lawsuit against YouTube, I don't think Prager should be sanctioned. I don't think he's honest. I don't think he's a good person. So I would not have done it.
But is Prager evil through and through?
I know, but even within that definition, he still seems to be saying that it was still a choice, that he might not have done it, but it may be a sanction. But he kind of, at least in this next clip.
Well, before we move on, can we
go ahead?
Let's pick apart this one for a little bit.
Sure.
I think it's interesting to ask, what does Yaron think he'd be sanctioning if he went on Prager? Because he says Prager's dishonest in his lawsuits and that sort of thing. So he has this character assassination against Prager. Prager is a bad character. And so is that what he'd be sanctioning if he went on Prager? It's not clear what he thinks he'd be approving. Normally when you have a guest on a show or something like that, I don't think the audience assumes that you're approving their character necessarily. It depends on what you say on that podcast or that interview.
Well, this goes back to the what we talked about with confusion. And one of their rationales is, well, because no one could confuse us with lefties, we can go talk to lefties. But because someone could confuse Ayn Rand as supporting conservatives or libertarians, we have to go out of our way to not sanction them. It's like the closer you are, the worse.
Yeah, so that kind of works with libertarians, but does it work with a religious conservative like Prager? Like Craig Biddle went on Prager, and did anyone confuse him with a religious conservative? I don't think so. So what I'm just curious. I know you probably don't have the answer because you're not Yaron, but what would Yaron be approving if he went on Prager, and why would that be so bad?
They say it would give the appearance that we're allies in the fight for liberty together, and we just have some superficial differences, and that, and that's not the case, and that's what makes it a sanction.
Yeah, but notice that's not what Yaron said. So the first thing that comes to Yaron's mind regarding sanction is Prager's dishonest. He has this bad lawsuit. So it's not that Prager is a fake advocate of liberty. It's that he's dishonest, which is Yaron's go-to. Like all of his enemies or his opponents are dishonest, and that's why he hates them. Anyone who criticizes him, even if done in a respectable, logical way or rational way, you write a whole article criticizing him, he'll call you disgusting or dishonest. So it's hard to take Yaron seriously when he just throws out these words like dishonest, or he doesn't want to morally sanction somebody.
Right. Well, so he he's saying that Prager shouldn't be sanctioned, but yet he still seems to say that it was a choice.
It's their money. They can do with it what it wants. They're trying to, they're trying to establish themselves. They're trying to get attention. They're trying to compete with the Institute, and they're coming from, and they have to spend a lot of money to do it. And they're spending a lot of money to do it, and they found an so-called ally, I guess, who gets their material in front of a lot of people. Are these the right people? Are these the people you want? I don't know. I doubt it. I'm not big on the religious conservatives as being our kind of people.
He's looking for more Richard Wolff's crowd as our kind of people, apparently.
Yeah, but notice that he just admitted the egoistic reason for going on Prager, which is to Prager as this platform that will allow Craig to promote his organization and his ideas and that sort of thing. And that's the egoistic reason for interacting with people you disagree with, or you even have fundamental disagreements with. If they allow you to go on and speak your mind and promote your stuff, that's a selfish reason to do something. And this is one of my main points that I want to stress today, is that the whole sanction debate, in my opinion, is some sort of gross distraction from egoism, from the pursuit of rational morality, a selfish morality, objectivist morality. The sanction argument is trying to reorient you towards a tribalistic view of evaluating your actions, or how you should act, or developing moral principles. It's saying, look at what this will do to our movement. You shouldn't allow libertarians to pretend to be for liberty, because objectivists are really for liberty. And if you go on a libertarian platform, they're going to confuse libertarians with Rand fans or advocates of capitalism. And it's this whole, orientation towards the abstract, the tribal, the groupthink, and it's not focusing on what's good for David Kelly, what's good for Craig Biddle, what's good for Yaron Brook, what's good for the Objective Standard, or what's good for the Atlas Society as an organization.
Right, but he does seem to give a little of that by saying, they're trying to build themselves up, and that's why it seems so. He's saying it's a sanction, but yet it's still okay. It's like some sanctions are worse than others, or it just
this shows that Yaron understands the selfish perspective, and this is why I think he's willing to go talk to socialists or Marxists or whatever. He doesn't shy away from that sort of thing, and yet he clings to the principle of not sanctioning the enemy. This is why he's such a hypocrite, because he tries to have his cake and eat it too. He understands that what's good for you is the proper thing to do, but yet he's trying to cling to this sanction argument, which is not in line with an egoistic morality.
Well, that's true, but they would say that they're trying to protect the purity of the movement and not let it be sullied by compromise.
Certain half of them wants to put the movement over the individual, but the other half of them realizes that that's wrong, and so they have this compartmentalized view of moral action. And so sometimes the movement is top priority, other times the individual is top priority. But objectivism says that's not how it works. You are always the top priority. Egoism is about your life. You are the top value. So unless you're facing like death or suicide or something, and where you have to make your death, worth something, or how some people die for their country in extreme situations. Unless that's your situation, some sort of emergency, your top priority should be yourself. You should be looking after your values, your goals. And so I think they confuse what's good for the individual and what's good for the organization or the movement, and they get conflated or they get confused in that some way.
Yeah, that absolutely happens. I think it's related to the purity is related to closed objectivism and not wanting it sullied, but that can become conflated with an excuse for top management to never be questioned. I don't know.
Hesitate to bring this up, but I think there's this loyalty to what they perceive as objectivism. And so they, like you say, they don't want objectivism sullied, or, they're kind of like trying to protect the integrity of it. But I think that comes from this sort of anti-reformer perspective. I'm calling it anti-reformer bias, but it really is a sort of anti-heretic type of thing, where they have this bias for the purity or truth of their philosophy. Like everything Rand said is like systematic whole, and so you can't have one principle that's flawed, or else everything will be flawed or problematic. So they
Right.
see it as a pure whole, and objectivism is true. And sometimes they confuse it with, just science. It's like they think that objectivism is the truth, and without having to justify it. So naturally, if you think that your system is the truth, then you're going to have this bias against anyone who comes at you and wants to reform it and say, look, there's problems with this philosophy. We need to take a critical look at it and change it a little bit. We're not going to change Rand's words. Like, her philosophy was her philosophy, but we're going to like modify our interpretation of it.
Knowledge is hierarchical. We have to reevaluate even what things are subject to question at a future time, and what is universal.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say there's this neo-objectivist movement coming up, and some people like Roger Bissell, he calls himself a neo-objectivist, I believe. So I think that's a good term for anyone who is seeing objectivism as a very good system with some problems, and which need to be tweaked in order to, make it more aligned with reality as we understand it now.
Yeah.
So this is what I think is going on with the sanction issue and objectivism. I think when they say we're against sanctioning evil, we're against sanctioning libertarian, or we're for not sanctioning them. Don't sanction the libertarian, don't sanction the religious conservative. They're basically saying, don't listen to the reformers who want to go out and learn different things and incorporate new knowledge and stuff into objectivism. Saying, don't pay attention to those people. Just focus on the pure objectivism. We have the pure stuff for you.
Right. And that way, you can't be asked to debate those ideas with one of the newcomers, because they're just trying to confuse the issue, or that would be a sanction to them, or, whatever words they're using for it. But I want to switch gears a little bit, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. I can come up with some other stuff later.
Okay, good. So, you had brought up a point about Sanction when Jordan Peterson went to Ocon in 2018, and some of the difference, and Yaron was asked about that, and if it was too much of a sanction, and he seems to think the venue plays a role in moral sanction.
I don't regret having him. I mean, he's wrong in a lot of things, but he brought an audience. I don't think, looking back on, I'm not sure Ocon was the right place to do it. I think setting it up somewhere else would have been a sanction. Was this too much of a sanction? Maybe. It might have been, given that it was Ocon. I think we could have done it better somewhere else. Somewhere else.
So, I mean, are there different appropriate venues to talk about certain ideas? That's like saying, only certain identity groups can use certain words.
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, I applaud Yaron for admitting that he semi regrets it. I don't know, but but why does he semi regret having Peterson and Ocon? He says it wasn't the right venue, or it could have been done better elsewhere. Well, why? Why would it have been done better elsewhere? What's wrong with doing it at Ocon?
Right. Well, I guess it goes back to that confusion, but I mean, the real problem was they had no plan. They invited him, like he said, because he was so popular and brought an audience, but they either didn't want to or weren't prepared to counter him effectively, maybe because of being starstruck, but it was not considered one of their best appearances.
Yeah, and I don't often bring up or agree with Charles too, but one of the things he said about that appearance is that it was completely wrong and they didn't win the debate. So I agree that they weren't prepared for Peterson and they did a horrible job countering his arguments. So it's like maybe they regret having him at Ocon because they didn't perform well. But if that's the case,
is the sanction about being effective?
Yeah, it's just they should have known that Peterson is an eloquent, thoughtful professor who has many arguments to make, and they should have been well prepared for that. And I recall originally I thought Onkar was going to debate Peterson, but then they switched it to Greg Salmieri, and I think it's a mistake. They should have had Onkar there because I think he would have done better.
Well, apparently that was not the consensus view of the people that make those decisions.
Well, I thought that the excuse was that he had a family obligation or something. They didn't kick him out because they thought he would perform poorly.
I didn't realize that. That's possible.
Yeah,
that's true.
He had some like last minute, personal issue. So I don't know what that was or what the circumstances were.
Or if that was a cover story.
Yeah. But I think Onkar would have had more biting, logical arguments instead of not even, in some cases, not even really addressing Peterson's points.
Sure. Well, Yaron was also asked about his appearance on Michael Malice, the famous anarchist. And, he talks about that Malice had stopped by Ocon and he decided to go on Malice. He thought it would be a good experiment. He's saying that Malice didn't interrupt him, was very respectful to him and Ayn Rand. Yaron thought it went really well and encouraged people to go watch it on Malice's YouTube page. Now, I don't know if that's a sanction, but then he's asked about it further.
About the Michael Malice. I know you talked anarchism with Malice on Lex, but this was your first time on Malice's show. Did you hold yourself to the same standard you held Biddle to with Prager? Did you let the audience know you disagreed with the host? The audience knows I disagree with the host. All you have to do is look at the comment section. I had been on with Malice on the Lex Friedman show, and that issue got raised. He did not bring it up. I was surprised. I thought he would, and I would have had no problem with that. But there was a context for my interview with Malice, and the context was that I'd been on a show where we had clearly disagreed, and it was clearly indicative. you know, looking back, should I have insisted on him asking me a question about it? You know, maybe it would have been better if I had.
It's interesting to see him struggle with answering such a basic question.
Yeah, I don't know why Malice had an obligation to ask certain questions. I just think, Yaron is so benevolent when judging himself. I mean, would David Kelly have been okay to talk to the libertarians as long as they didn't ask him certain questions?
Yeah. It's hard to know, what is going on in Yaron's mind here, because he's not very good at articulating, what he's thinking.
Let
So
me offer a hypothesis of a, hidden standard. Basically, if ARI management wants to do it, it's not a sanction. And if one of their philosophical enemies wants to do it, like Craig or the Atlas Society, it is a sanction. And they shouldn't have done it.
So is he being pragmatic, or is he just being arbitrary all the time? It's like it's hard to determine whether he has any principle at all. What his motivation, does his motivation completely change depending on the weather?
It depends on what appearances he's offered, I think. But be that as it may, a little into this, I type in the chat that Malice's book, the Anarchist Handbook ad, was in the frame the whole time. My goal was to make the point that he shouldn't be so harsh about Craig's appearance with Biddle by that standard. But when Yaron reads that, he finds it easier to throw Malice under the bus.
Scott says an Anarchist Handbook ad was in the frame the whole time. Well, that sucks if that's the case. I didn't see that. But that sucks because that's very sneaky of Malice to do that. So if I'd known that, I probably wouldn't have done the interview. So
There's another regret moment. Kind of interesting. I mean, why didn't he expect sneakiness from an anarchist?
I mean, to be fair to Malice, the Anarchist Handbook it's his own book. He's been promoting with the same frame on almost every one of his podcasts. At least when the book was the most current. I mean, someone is being sneaky.
Well, Yaron should learn from this and put his own books in his background.
Yeah, the ones he co-wrote with Don Watkins. That's right. But here's the kicker to that story. When Yaron posted the Malice interview in September 2022 on his own channel, and while I give him credit for cleaning most of it up, some of it still actually includes the frames for Malice's book on Yaron's own channel. So if not giving the appearance of being allies is so crucial and Sanction is so bad, I mean, should Yaron be advertising for the Anarchist Handbook?
Well, this is the sort of thing that comes up, typically when you're dealing with, interviews and things like that. People want to promote their stuff. So I don't know. I don't even know why this is a big problem. It's understood that you don't necessarily sanction some book because you allow somebody else to promote his book. So it's a mutual thing. You promote your stuff on their channel, and then they promote their stuff on your channel. It's give and take.
My point is that these rules are being applied inconsistently. I mean, first he claims that it was wrong for Malice to have that in the frame. Then, it was, if he'd have known that, he wouldn't have done the show. And, but then, it's still on his own channel when it comes up there. If it either shouldn't have been that big a deal, or, they should have at least taken the time to scrub it or not post it, at least on Yaron's channel. I don't understand how that's not a sanction.
Yeah, well, I think we've established that. I mean, I think it's not hard to establish that, like you say, Yaron doesn't pay attention to these things. So part of the sanction issue is, moral judgment, and sometimes it's said that if you're going to go on someone's show that you disagree with, you have to establish your disagreement with them. Like, I think that was part of this interaction with Malice, is that the problem was Yaron thinks it was obvious that he disagrees with Malice, and so he didn't need to make that an issue in the interview. But my problem with that is that I don't think we should consider ourselves martyrs for moral pronouncements. It's like, it's not our job to go around, even in an interview with an anarchist. It's not our job to go in there to morally condemn them for their anarchism, or say, or point out our differences. It's our job to go in there and promote ourselves, do what's good for us,
Absolutely.
do for yourself, and to make your positive argument for your viewpoint. And if it comes up in a debate or something, then sure, you bring up points against anarchism, or you reveal your differences. But that's not the focus or the primary purpose of going on someone's show.
Hi,
my
I'm here to disagree with you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Yaron Brook, and I hate anarchism.
I don't think he should be held to that standard, but he shouldn't hold others to that standard then.
It's kind of like how Ayn Rand wasn't a militant atheist. Her purpose wasn't going to go around and bash religion. Her purpose was to promote objectivity, reason, egoism, her philosophy. And if it came up, she would debate, or give her view of religion. That should be our way of dealing with libertarians. It's not our goal to go out and say, you libertarians, you're disgusting, you're evil, you stole from Rand, blah blah blah.
It's so second-handed. You're doing it for other objectivists.
Exactly. You're not doing it for yourself. It's
or for the relationship, or trying to convert people.
Or maybe you are. Maybe you think it's in your self-interest to just go out and or even if you thought that way, you wouldn't be just debating libertarians, right? You wouldn't even talk. But maybe you're like a Yaron, and you think, well, it's okay to talk to these people, but I have to go out and point out my differences, or I have to make sure that I'm unique and I'm distinctive and I stand out from the libertarian. And in order to do that, I have to criticize everything about libertarianism and say how evil it is. And I was reading one of Peter Schwartz's articles about libertarianism, and he was claiming that they're not even for liberty. So his point is that they're anti-liberty. They're this perversion.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's the way they.
And so even if let's assume that's true. Even if that's true, and there's these evil libertarians out there, and they're just out to pervert the concept of liberty, which maybe some of them are, but I don't think the vast majority are. I think a lot of them might just be confused, or they don't think morality is very important in justifying liberty. So they're not like academically evil about it, But let's assume that they are out to pervert. Well, is it still your job to go out and like morally condemn them? No, it's not your job to do that. It's your job to promote the opposite and say, look, I believe this is my view of liberty, take it or leave it.
Yeah. And, you just reminded me of a Craig Biddle quote I was going to get to later in the show, but he, in defending the debate, says if you think about it, you quickly see that young libertarians, young people who want to defend liberty but don't yet know how, are perfect audience for objectivists to address. But Schwartz and his ARI followers said to them, in effect, although we could tell you how to defend liberty on solid ground, we won't because you're evil.
Yeah.
I mean, that's summing up the ARI view.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe this is also part of the tribalistic view, because if you look at the libertarian movement as just a tribe, then who are going to be the representatives of that tribe? The leader, the tribal elders, people who are.
The deeper truth is this stuff about saying you're not a real libertarian or objectivist. I mean, it's all through the libertarian movement. I mean, I don't know how much of it, some people got picked up through Ayn Rand, but they're like, no, you can't talk to those people. And maybe it's just that some of these fights, were more universal and have to do with almost any kind of group dynamics.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we live in a society that's highly tribalistic already. So, but I'm saying an objectivist shouldn't have that orientation. You shouldn't be looking at the Libertarian Party and saying, we're not going to talk to any libertarian group because these particular leaders that I've quoted have apparently an anti-liberty perspective. You look at the movement and then you see subgroups within the movement, and you should treat each subgroup as a subgroup. They don't necessarily agree with the other subgroups, but there's this umbrella concept of liberty, which may or may not be distorted among some of these subgroups.
the
But
bottom line is, Rand had issues with the Libertarian Party and did not want people intermixing with them.
well, yeah, but why didn't she want them intermixing?
Well, that's a whole rabbit hole. I just found a piece where, Nathaniel Brandon was doing some work with John Hospers in 1971. So, that could have been part of the motivation.
Well, consider this. It seems to me that Rand wasn't a big defender of concepts, except when it comes to like selfishness and egoism. She rejected conservatism. For a while, she was kind of, on board with conservatism as it meant, pro-capitalism. But
Conservatism and libertarian have changed definitions over the last 50 years.
Yeah, but how do concepts change definition? By people who use those concepts.
Right.
So my problem is that I think Rand abandoned conservatism too early. I think she declared it dead, and wrote this article, Conservatism.
Right. Part of that had to do with her fight with Buckley.
Yeah, and so she declares things dead. And so one of the things, I have a quote here from Peter Schwartz. Well,
I don't want to get too far off the rails here.
I didn't write down that quote. I wrote down a different one. Anyway, in his article, Libertarianism, a Perversion of Liberty, he mentions that the libertarians, you shouldn't, he says objectivists shouldn't use the word libertarian to describe themselves, because libertarians have perverted that word. Yeah. And so libertarian doesn't mean what it used to mean. And so, like Rand giving up on the word conservative, Schwartz has given up on the word libertarian because other people stole it. So he's not a fighter. He doesn't fight for concepts. And I think that objectivists should be fighters for these concepts. We should reclaim these concepts and use them. And if that means saying we're a libertarian group, we actually believe in liberty.
They put their energy into fighting people that question them.
Yeah, well, but this is what has to happen if we're going to get rid of libertarianism. Is now we've given up the word libertarian to the libertarians, And so it's going to mean whatever they want it to mean. And I have the same problem with conservative, and I have the same problem with like Republicans.
Well,
So
I mean, but some of that gets to semantics. I
it is
just,
semantics,
yeah.
but it's language. It's
But
how we communicate.
I just, that's fair. There was this clip from August of last year where Yaron is asked about whether objectivist intellectuals can have friendly chats with Prager or Jordan Peterson. Now, this was around the time that Alex Epstein's interview with Jordan Peterson, and he's an ARI ally. So he summarizes with this bit about Sanction.
Again, I don't think that these decisions, who you talk to and who you don't, who you sanction and who you don't, who you endorse, who you don't, is when is it an endorsement or when is it a sanction, or what's the difference between the two? I don't think those are easy topics. I think those are difficult topics that, at least at the Institute, we spend a lot of time really thinking about.
So I give him credit for saying it's hard, but if it's hard, that means that good people can come to different conclusions about what constitutes a sanction, including David Kelly talking to libertarians.
Yeah. Well, why is it so hard? I mean, they've had this issue for decades. So haven't they solved it yet? Like, how
They have
long
to
is it?
weave it into the different invitations they get. That's how they build the principles out.
It's hard to apply it, but come on. I mean, each person has to apply it themselves. It's not, it's like, is ARI going to create a sanction principle for each individual? No. You know, they're going to create their own sanction principle. Like, what are they willing to sanction? What's good for them? What's good and bad for them?
Well, there's just some things they arbitrarily, or well, they just assert that are not, there's no question, and that's, if it goes to Kelly or, or I guess Craig these days, the way they've treated him the last couple of years as well. But one
problem is that they attempt to, I think they attempt to apply their personal standard to like a universal level and say, we wouldn't talk to a libertarian supper party or supper organization, so you shouldn't because it's a sanction. But really, like I said before, this is kind of ignoring egoism. Like, was it good for David Kelly? If it were good for David Kelly to talk to these libertarians, then that's objectivist. That's Randian. If it were bad for him, then that's not objectivist. That's not in line with Rand. But I don't think they made that argument.
Yeah, I mean, you can't always know, just because one speech doesn't go well, the process of trying to speak to lots of different groups can still be good. You can't necessarily just base it on effectiveness and say, because I didn't get a lot of applause, it was wrong for me to do this speech.
Right. No, but it would be you'd have to know Kelly's values and whether him talking to the libertarians,
right,
improved his life or, harmed him. And that's a tough question, just you'd have to know a lot about his situation and the consequences of him talking to the libertarians,
What they'll do is they'll say, well, based on Harry's piece about Peter's piece on libertarianism being a perversion of liberty and Rand endorsing that, that now it's obvious, and anyone who doesn't see it is dishonest. That's part of what they say as well. I mean, one piece of objectivist sanctioned folklore was that they didn't consider the Atlas Society as legitimate. All right, but when it came to politics and Yaron justifying wanting the Democrats to hold the Senate in the midterms in 2022, Yaron has no problem quoting one of the Atlas Society scholars for a rationale.
I was reading yesterday an essay by somebody who I don't talk to anymore and is not who I've lost a lot of respect for over many, many years, but who is a good writer. And in politics, I found that I've agreed with him more than almost anybody else over the last, since Trump got elected, because he's been very anti-Trump. Good for him. And that's Robert Trzcinski. I don't know how many of you know Robert Trzcinski. He's got a Substack, but he now works for the Atlas Society. So my respect for him only diminishes in spite of the fact that on most issues regarding politics, I agree with him.
So, because they agree so much about their hate of Trump, I mean, Yaron now needs a person he's lost respect for to be his proxy for hoping the Democrats hold the Senate, which they did. And he does seem sheepish in how he brings it up. He's like, and that's Rob Trzcinski.
Yeah. Sounds like he doesn't know exactly what to think of Rob Trzcinski. But since they agree on Trump, there's got to be some good there.
Exactly. I mean, I just think, what Yaron seems to be saying is that if the person is making a good objective point, then it's good to interact with people at the Atlas Society. But, of course, he doesn't hold to that. He can't hold on to that because Yaron has asked about two of our past guests, Andrew Bernstein and Mark Pellegrino, being interviewed by my peeps at the Atlas Society, where Rob Trzcinski's from as well. The guy Yaron quoted to speak for him politically.
I need to clarify that both Mark Pellegrino and Andrew Bernstein were interviewed by the Atlas Society recently, but that does not mean they're joining by any means. I don't know that it doesn't mean that. It certainly means that they're sanctioning that organization. It certainly means that they're giving that organization legitimacy. They view them as a legitimate organization, which I do not. I think it's wrong of them to have been interviewed. I won't be surprised if I wouldn't be shocked if Andrew joined. Obviously, the Atlas Society is making significant effort to try to recruit intellectuals that might feel like they're, I don't know, that might feel alienated right now from ARI. I don't know if Andrew does or doesn't, but I wouldn't be surprised. And they're doing an effort to do that, and to some extent it's working. So I'm disappointed. That's all I can really say. I'm disappointed. Even if they just did an interview, if they're not joining. But an interview is a sanction.
An interview is a sanction.
Right. Did he apply that to Michael Malice?
Did you believe this when he interviewed Peterson at Ocon?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just, he's still acting as a sanction enforcer while also acting, as an apologist for the establishment for, quoting Trzcinski when it suited him. I mean, Andy showed bravery and independence by contrast.
Well, Andy does his own thing.
Exactly. And, it's some of that. It's a type of psychological bullying to saying, oh, I think he's going to join the Atlas Society. It's like, it's to get him to say, no, I wouldn't do that. I mean, why are these intellectuals feeling alienated from ARI? I mean, did he ever ask Andy if he's feeling alienated from ARI? When's the last time they talked? 2-3 years ago?
Who knows? But the thing I like about Andy is he's clearly in it for his own selfish reasons. So he's acting selfishly. He's acting like an objectivist. Whereas Yaron, it's hard to tell why he's acting half the time.
Exactly.
It's like his motives are not clear to me. And half of the time, they don't seem like they're objectivist motives. They don't seem selfish or egoistic. They seem very pragmatic, or in some cases, it seems like he's just, chasing the limelight, or, he thinks that selling his soul to get on a Rogan would be in his benefit. he has weird motives. It's hard to pin him
It
down.
just, you get this sense that somehow if Prager went on Rogan, then it would be bad and a sanction. Or not if Biddle went on with Joe Rogan, that would be called a sanction. But unless Rogan wanted Yaron on as well, then that would be, Yaron would have different reasons for why he showed where he disagreed or whatever kind of pile of excuses why your way is actually different. This one I'm going out of order on. It's from November 2020, and it actually relates to Jordan Peterson at Ocon because I think we've played it as part of an earlier show, but it's important context for the clip after about Jordan Peterson and how much you can like him.
If somebody thinks Jordan Peterson is great, they're not you can't be an objectivist, not fully. You can't agree with Jordan Peterson and objectivism. You can agree with one or the other. Jordan Peterson contradicts objectivism epistemology, contradicts objectivist ethics, he contradicts objectivist metaphysics. And he's not a capitalist. He's not a laissez-faire capitalist. So how is Jordan Peterson? It's Jordan Peterson or objectivism. It can't be both. Now, you can enjoy certain things about Jordan Peterson, certain of his lectures, certain of his ideas, without endorsing Jordan Peterson, and you still need to be able to see that he's dangerous.
So you can't fully be an objectivist if you think Peterson's great. Are they allowing for partial objectivists now?
Maybe. Hopefully. I don't know. They should recognize the reality that people, just like some people accept certain ideas from Peterson and certain ideas from other people, people agree with Rand on certain points and disagree with her on others. And that's another aspect of this whole movement issue is like, how are we going to spread objectivism? Are we going to only talk to people that we can sanction and only spread the ideas to them? Or are we going to talk to anyone who will listen and try to inject any amount of Rand's ideas into their minds as possible? I think of this as the Inception versus segregation issue. It seems like ARI wants to segregate Rand's ideas into this world of the approved, and then other people want to have this Inception mode where we're out to talk to anybody and to like put ideas in their head and try to get any Rand idea in their head that we can. Any good rational objective idea to further the cause of reason. Our goal is to be champions of reason, not necessarily champions of this objectivist system. We're not trying to keep the system pure. We're trying to inject rational ideas into people's heads.
Yeah. One way seems more open than the other.
Well,
but
one is more selfish. One is more selfish because what is more selfish than trying to influence somebody else with your personal views, with your ideas?
Right. We believe the world would be a better place if more people were, appreciated the ideas.
Yeah, and even if you suffer from your fellows, like if I were to go talk to a religious conservative and then Yaron says, oh, he shouldn't have done that, because now he looks like he approves of religious conservatism or something. Well, I don't care what Yaron thinks. Right. I'm not trying to inject ideas into his head.
There's a lot of young objectivists that do want his approval.
Yeah, I mean, I've grown out of that phase where I want approval from the elders of objectivism. I'm trying to promote what I think is true, and a lot of that comes from objectivism.
Right.
I'm trying to promote that to whatever audience will listen to me. I do have standards. I pretty much reject the left because they're insane. I don't reject them because I think it's wrong to talk to them. I reject the left because I think it's pointless to talk to them. There's no way I'm going to convert those insane maniacs. It's like
Well,
they don't listen to reason.
I
So
mean, the
I
left
try
is
to.
even a bigger group. I'm willing to, judge their different degrees of being on the left. I'm not going to write all the left off.
Well, I pretty much do write all the left all off, but there
Even
are going.
Lieberman?
Of course, I'm speaking generally, and there are specific people who consider themselves to be on the left, which I don't think they're really on the left. Like, there are some progressives today who consider themselves to be on the left, like Jimmy Dore or that guy Glenn Greenwald, but they're mostly journalists and comedians, and I don't think they're true leftists. They're not like hardcore ideological leftists. They mostly criticize Democrats, or they criticize the woke mob, or
Okay.
they're kind of like heretics within the left, and I think that they have a rational streak in them. I think you can kind of relate to them a little bit. But what I'm talking about are the dead brains like Joe Biden and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I don't think you're going to
Sure.
reach.
I'm not for talking to everyone. I'm just saying that there are individuals. I'm not, I'm still want to convert some of disaffected lefties. Maybe
Well,
convert's
anyone
not the
you think
right
you can
word.
convert. See, I don't see the difference between me and Yaron is I'm not telling you not to talk to the left.
Right.
I'm not telling you, he'll tell you, don't even bother with the libertarians. Don't talk to libertarians.
Well,
I'm
that,
just saying, I don't think I can relate to them. But if you can relate to somebody on the left, go for it. I think, because I'm all about Inception. I'm about spreading your ideas and getting it to whoever will listen. So if you think
right.
someone on the left is rational and will listen to your idea, go for it.
Yeah. And that clip was meant to say, don't try to talk to Jordan Peterson or his fans, or, you can't let them get too close, or they can't be part of objectivism. But, I mean, if it's wrong to endorse or sanction Peterson, and if an interview is a sanction, then it would logically follow that no one should do an interview with Peterson, even though we've seen that, Yaron would like to even have another shot at the debate with him. But Alex Epstein was also recently interviewed by Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson has also interviewed Stephen Hicks before. So Yaron gets this question.
Still trying to get sanction. If Jordan Peterson does an interview with someone at TAS, for example, is it then wrong for someone at AOI to do his show? No. I don't expect Jordan Peterson to understand the difference between TAS is the Atlas Society, and an AOI. That's an internal thing. I expect people who associate with AOI to get the difference. I expect objectivists to get the difference, but I don't expect Jordan Peterson to get the difference.
So I find that, to be one of the most important clips, because it's not that Kelly is objectively bad in a way that others outside the movement could understand. Hating the Atlas Society is more of an internal control mechanism, an unspoken tenet of his subjective version of objectivism, even as he and ARI sometimes act like they don't police who is or isn't a real objectivist. I mean, saying he doesn't expect Jordan Peterson to get the difference is kind of a nicer way of saying he would expect to be laughed at for trying to explain to some outsider the exact nature of David Kelly's moral crimes.
Yeah, well, why does he have such a low expectation of a Peterson or a Peterson fan? Like, shouldn't a Peterson or a Peterson fan like figure out the difference between the two organizations? I mean, one is for open objectivism, one is for closed objectivism. It's not a terribly difficult issue to understand at a surface level.
But did you hear him say it's an internal thing?
Yeah, I heard that, but I'm just saying, why is he not expecting Peterson to get it? Like, is it so hard? Is it something that's not important for Yaron to make an issue? If if Yaron is this gung-ho about Kelly being a problem, then shouldn't he be, speaking out about it to people all around the world and saying, look, don't listen to this group. They're not the true objectivists. Maybe he wants to keep it internal because he knows how ridiculous it'll sound, once it becomes a public thing.
Yeah, I agree. Well, then Yaron tries to explain sanction again.
The issue of sanction is, are you, is this other human being, is this other perspective, is this other set of views something that you accept as, debatable, okay, reasonable, within the scope of something that is acceptable to debate and discuss? I think that's true of Jordan Peterson. I think it's true for Jordan Peterson to view Atlas Society that way. It's not true for me to view the Atlas Society that way.
So it's true for some people, but not for others.
See, he gets it. That's him getting it.
What do you mean getting it?
Sanction is about whether it's good for you or whether it's true for you. So is it okay for Peterson to sanction TAS because he thinks the topic is worthy of debate? But for Yaron, it's not okay for him to do it because he has a deeper context, and for him it's not good. It's not okay to debate this. It's like beyond the pale. So he understands that it's egoism is about your values, your individual personal values and what's good or bad for you. He gets that, but he's confused. Like when it comes to maybe the organizational level or the movement level, he doesn't know whether ARI should be interacting with TAS or debating them because there's more people involved or more gears in motion. I don't know what the issue exactly is, but
if it's some of it's transitive property, if A should be okay to talk to B and B should be okay to talk to C, then A should be okay to talk to C. I mean, Yaron admits it's perfectly reasonable for Jordan Peterson to see the Atlas Society as worthy of talking to. But on the other hand, you are not permitted to have that view to the exact degree you have submitted to Yaron as your leader.
Well, I don't know. What I have to say about this is that the focus should be on what's good for you. What's good for you in the long term and sometimes in the short term or a combination. What is best for you?
You don't always know ahead of time. I mean, I think it's a fair way to go about it, but I mean, yeah, objectivists are the ones that have to understand that lesson and not taking it from, these leaders telling you who you're allowed to talk to, depending on how much of an objectivist you are.
Right. I mean, but you can determine to some extent what is good for you based on logic and based on your history. You have to recall what has happened to you in the past when you made similar decisions or done similar things versus what your reason tells you what will happen based on your actions, what the consequences will be. So you can use a combination there.
But that's all common sense. What they're coming out with these pronouncements that libertarians are evil, you must know it, and it's evasion if you don't, and things with those implications. You can't be a real objectivist if you love Jordan Peterson, or they're telling you what you're allowed to like to some extent, or how much you're allowed to like them.
What occurs to me as well is that they're trying to tell you how much you should like them or not like them. But what really started all of this, in my opinion, was the sanction of the victim, which we brought up in the beginning. And that seems to be getting lost we seem to have gone from the sanction of the victim to the sanction of people you don't like, or the sanction of some negative thing. You know, it's not necessarily that you're being victimized by these people. Are you being victimized by libertarians? Or are you being victimized by religious conservatives? And is that what you're sanctioning? Are you sanctioning them as your victimizers? Or are you sanctioning the thing that they do that victimizes you? You know, that doesn't seem to be the question anymore. The question now is, what are you sanctioning when you go talk to Prager? And is that good or bad? You know, if I go talk to Prager, am I sanctioning his religion? You know, it doesn't make sense. It's like, I have to explicitly state my approval of religion if I'm going to sanction it. I don't sanction somebody else's traits just because I talk to them.
This is where they get back to confusion and trying to hold you to a standard of you have to trash them to prove your bona fides to other objectivists.
Well, that may be part of it. You know, it's a sort of like a test, you know, of your group loyalty or something. But also,
that's not objectivism.
No, it's not. But also, maybe it's now I forgot what I was going to say. But you know, if I go on Prager, am I approving of his religion? No, I have to say that I approve of something in order to sanction it, don't I? There's no like implicit sanction of someone else's character traits.
Well, Rand does address that and say, you know, at the very least, you have to say, I disagree, rather than, you know, that silence is almost a tacit sanction, which I don't know that that's, you know, it's difficult. It is. And, but, you know, for me, that's less of an issue of, you know, some of it's strategic. It's how you get in there. Like if someone's telling you, you know, just about some of the debauchery, and if you're all, you know, judgy the first time and saying like, you know, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, you know, that drinking's going to kill you or stuff. They're not going to open up to you as much, you know, the next day or the next interaction you have. And so, you know, there are strategic concerns with how best to influence a person and even try to, you know, get them to change in some way. But, you know, the moral sanction is them telling you who you're allowed to talk to.
Yeah. So I remember what I was going to say before. So regarding Prager, I don't think if you're going to appeal to like an individualist philosophy, you would say that someone like Biddle is responsible for his own views and Prager's responsible for his own views. And just because Biddle goes on Prager's platform, that doesn't mean Biddle approves or sanctions of anything Prager has to say, except that he thinks this is a platform for speaking his own views. Like Biddle thinks this is a platform where I can speak my own views. You know, so I wouldn't go on a program where I was going to be heavily censored. Like if they say you can't tell your side of the story or something, well, then there's no point going on. But if you start saying Biddle shouldn't have gone on Prager because it's a sanction of Prager's views or his Google lawsuit or whatever, well, that's treating Biddle in a sort of tribalistic way. It's saying that there's this tribe going on with Biddle and Prager, and since they're together, they're this little tribe of two people, or they're different. Maybe it's both organizations they represent. Now there's this tribe, and so there's some idea or religious element that they both must sanction because they're part of the same tribe. But that's not what's happening. They're both individuals. They both have their own views. So you have to treat them individually. Don't treat them as a tribe just because they're together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes to even plans for trying to unite the broader liberty movement to say we're not endorsing everything each one of you believes. We're not responsible for the anything said by your individual members. We're just, seeing what all we can agree on and trying to coordinate pushing for those things.
Yeah.
Um,
To what extent you need disclaimers is an interesting question.
Yeah, that's true. Now I want to just get to one more example here of what sanction, is because, in this clip, Yaron is asked about Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire and whether he's going to rein Matt Walsh in. And he basically smears Ben Shapiro as selling out his own religion to appease anti-Semitic conservatives.
While I like Ben Shapiro and everything, if he wants to be consistent with his Jewish orthodoxy, it's not pro-liberty and it's not pro-capitalism and it's not ultimately reason. And, Ben Shapiro's in a tricky situation because my guess is that many of the listeners to the Daily Wire are not too happy with Jews. And I think Ben Shapiro has to cater to the Christian right.
It's kind of a weird thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a secular Jew and myself a Daily Wire Plus subscriber, and I find your own comments to be an affront to Ayn Rand. He's kind of adopting woke tactics of assuming racism in anyone to the right of us. And Yaron then actually makes this sweeping generalization.
The religious right is ultimately anti-liberty. It has to be anti-liberty. Its religion will demand it. It might not come out now. It might not come out immediately. It might not be the first thing they want to tackle. But the logic of it necessitates that ultimately, they're going to be anti-liberty.
All right, so I think I'm getting this sanction thing. People like Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire, they cannot be for liberty, according to Yaron. Now, I don't agree with Yaron, but based on his own logic, this is a clear case where he wouldn't want to sanction the Daily Wire or give any impression that they might be allies for liberty.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, that's basically what Schwartz was saying about libertarians.
Okay.
They can't be for liberty.
Well, I'd like to believe this next clip was not totally inspired by your own hearing about Steven Crowder and his $50 million offer from the Daily Wire.
It says, would you be willing to work for Daily Wire if they let you say whatever you want? Yeah, I might. I worked for, for Glenn Beck's thing for a while, and they didn't pay me just to get to their audience. So I might. It would really depend on the terms more than the money. It would depend on what it means. They would let me say what I want. To what extent did I have to endorse other hosts? To what extent do I have to be nice to other hosts?
So is working for someone a sanction of them on some level?
It's associating with them.
I mean, could they assume that Yaron might be partners in liberty for them? I mean, what if the communists paid Steven Crowder rates and would give him good terms?
Well, he would make it clear that he fundamentally disagreed with Daily Wire on everything because they can't be for liberty. And so, that's why Daily Wire would want him working for them, because he fundamentally disagrees with them.
I'm here because I don't think this group can be for liberty.
I am Yaron Brook, and I hate Daily Wire.
My bottom line is that sanction is used as an ARI internal control mechanism. and they hold themselves to a much more benevolent standard than for Ayn Rand fans that aren't in their inner circle.
Control mechanism to maintain their status in the movement,
Yeah.
or to maintain some idea of integrity, like philosophical integrity.
Well, I mean, that's how it's couched, but I mean, ultimately, if you can start questioning them about things like sanction or who to talk to, the next thing you know, people are going to be starting to question some of their management decisions over the years.
Yeah. I tend to, I mean, this is just me speculating now, but I think it's more of a, like I said before, like an anti-reformer bias. They may not be, they may not have a conscious motive of of maintaining, or of what did I say before? Of keeping the system pure or something like that. But they just don't like to deal with reformers. So it's like maybe it's a hassle, or maybe they have some emotional response. They don't like dealing with critics or looking inward. Oh, one thing I was going to bring up before is that the movement as a whole, I think, has gears. So, like, if you're in a philosophical movement, you have gears. You have, like, first gear is going out and creating new followers, finding new followers, gaining acolytes, that sort of thing. Second gear would be engaging with opposition, trying to influence other people, going into the lion's den and coming out victorious. Like, third gear would be taking criticism and correcting any errors in your own philosophy. Now, I don't think objectivism has gotten out of second gear. I think even the Atlas Society, I don't think there's much taking criticism there. There's a lot of giving criticism to ARI as an organization, or giving criticism to individuals. But in, like, looking at the philosophy itself, I'm not sure there's a lot of criticism there. I think that's still on the fringes. I think there is this independent objectivist sort of movement going on, and there are independent objectivists who are criticizing elements of Rand's philosophy. I think they're in third gear. But fourth gear would be going into politics, and we haven't even gotten there. I don't think, I think objectivism as a movement is just stuck in second gear, um, trying to figure out which of our opponents are worthy of debating, or worthy of platforming, or worthy of interviewing, going onto their platforms. It's like this whole, it's like, should
Well,
we get out of, should we stay in second gear, or should we go to third gear? We're not sure,
I,
is that, yeah, go ahead.
no, I get what you're saying. I would like to say that, the Atlas Society and or Biddle is at least trying to get to third gear. This is a quote from Biddle from his piece defending the debate, saying, to call such a debate a collaboration or a moral compromise or a moral sanction is to create a package deal amounting to discussing or debating ideas with people who disagree with your ideas is immoral. That is both false and extremely destructive of efforts to advance objectivism. Imagine young objectivists thinking, I better not debate or discuss ideas with someone who holds ideas contrary to objectivism. That would be a moral sanction. And then Craig says, I can't think of a better way to stop the very thing we need to do more of if we want to advance Rand's ideas.
Yeah, well, I
So he
like some
seems to get what you're saying.
at some level, I think he is going in that direction. I was very happy to hear that they were having this debate, and I look forward to more of these internal debates. I think ARI should have been debating David Kelly a long time ago, if both of them were open to that sort of thing. It's one
Absolutely.
thing to shout at each other from distant places, and not really engage each other at a serious level or respectful level. And then it's another thing to be in the same room and treat each other civilly and have an actual discussion or debate about a serious topic that affects the whole movement. So that's what I'd like to see more of. But when I was talking about, taking criticism and correcting errors, I literally mean errors that Rand made or mistakes in application. So I think that we should turn our focus to that. It's the people who are done with the infighting and all of that. We should just get together and start talking about any any problems we have with the philosophy and try to hash that out and see if we can
Well, I think
figure
that's
out.
healthy overall, but you're going to get disagreement and discussion there. And part of it becomes what sort of moral pronouncements you make with the people you disagree with. It can, are you going to say, oh, no one should talk to that person anymore? That's what
No,
ends up happening. I mean, yeah, I think what you're saying, those individual debates are happening with individual objectivists that aren't affiliated with a group per se, that are just on social media.
yeah, so I'm happy to talk to anyone who considers themselves a Rand fan, or an objectivist, or a neo-objectivist, or whatever. Um, you have to have some fundamental agreement. You can't be a subjectivist in spirit. You have to subscribe to an objective perspective on the world. You have to be in favor of reason. You can't put faith over reason. That's kind of a no-no. Um, and you have to be some level of an egoist and look after yourself versus a total altruistic mentality. So as long as you're in the ballpark of the objectivist principles, and you like Rand and you consider Rand a philosopher with ideas that you respect and you're trying to understand, and maybe you disagree with certain elements of her philosophy but not hardened principles of it, then I think you should be respected and welcomed into the debate, and just don't be a complete rude person, and have some tolerance for other people's emotional outbursts if they're that type of person. But yeah, there needs to be grown-ups in the room. There needs to be people who can manage the conversation and keep it on point and stop people from going off the rails.
Yeah, they just need to get rid of the people that were excommunicated back in the 60s and bring in some fresh thinking. But I think it's good. I think we talked about a lot of really good issues on sanction and just the way that it, I think, is applied arbitrarily. We'll let people that watch those videos make their own conclusions. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I did want to bring up one other thing. So something interesting about objectivism is that it has this sort of fictional foundation. And this is a problem, I think, when it comes to the question of sanction. As you know, a lot of objectivism comes from Galt's speech in Atlas Shrugged. And when you talk to objectivists, and I'm sure I did this when I was younger, a lot of my examples or my views would be based on the story from Atlas Shrugged. And so you would be arguing with someone and say, oh, um, we shouldn't sanction we shouldn't be sanctioning our victimizers.
Right.
And then you'd say, well, and then someone would say, yeah, but the real world, in the real world, you have to deal with people, you have to influence other people any way you can. And so then as an adult, I'm thinking, I shouldn't be using the Gulch example, like, oh, the ideal, you have this ideal. And so you should be like Galt and not sanction your victimizers. But in reality, that's not the case because you don't have a Gulch to run to. in Atlas Shrugged, I guess I'm not explaining this very well, but my point is that in Atlas Shrugged, the world is different from our world. It's a fictional world. In that world, the victims, the Dagneys, the Hanks, the John Galts, they had Galt's Gulch to run to. They had a place to escape their victimizers. But in this world, we don't really have a place to escape to. We have to deal with our victimizers. They're in our society. We have a division of labor with them, and we have to deal with that. And I don't think we can adequately change the culture or do what we want to in this culture without dealing with them. We have to somehow put ideas into their heads and get them to change. And if we're not willing to deal with certain segments of the population because we consider them through and through evil, then we're going to fail ultimately if we don't convince enough people to change their minds or to not tolerate these evil people. So at most we need to deal with the semi-evil people who have some good. And then even if you see like totally evil, you consider them totally evil, well, you're probably kind of wrong, because I don't think anyone can be totally evil unless he's like super Hitler or something. Even like the example of the Marxist professor, I'm not sure I would talk to a Marxist professor. I'm not sure I'd have much to say to him. But if you have an idea or an inkling of how to get through to him, then go for it.
Right.
I'm not going to say, oh, you're sanctioning Marxism, or that's ridiculous. You're trying to change the culture you're living in, and you have to do that by dealing with the people you have to deal with.
Good stuff. I think that makes sense. I think concretizing with real world examples is what we need at this point. Yeah, I think we talked about a lot of great material, and we will be back next couple weeks with more. We look forward to your comments. This has been the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.